stand up. Just turn around. All right, stretch if you need to. Respect your own animal rights. All right. I always lean too far into microphones, so I'll try not to do that. So I often tell the joke that I quit eating meat when I was, she knows that I was get dry. I quit eating meat in 1976, which was the same year that I went to my first gay rights rally. And what I usually joke about is that back then, it was cool to be a vegetarian, but lesbians were still seen as sex-crazed perverts. And now, it's cool to be queer, while vegans are seen as pleasure-hating prudes. So that's kind of interesting. But I've been thinking about the 70s and the gay lib movement a little bit more lately, particularly with regard to this question of movement whiteness in the animal liberation and vegan movements, and you'll see why I separate those two movements rather than conflate them soon. One thing that those of you who aren't old enough to know or to have experienced it might not realize is that back in the 1970s, there was quite a bit of hostility on the left to this new gay lib movement. And we were told that this was a bourgeois concern that was only of interest to people who had nothing else to worry about. We were told that homosexuality was a white thing, and that the gay rights movement was a white thing. Are you recognizing any of these challenges? Okay. These charges were both true and false, and they were leveled in both good faith and in bad faith. They were obviously not true in the sense of only white people being queer, but it absolutely was the case that the organized gay liberation movement was disproportionately white. It was not, in fact, all white. That was a lie. But it was, in fact, disproportionately right. Disproportionately white. and that disproportionate whiteness did have a little bit to do with the fact of the conflation of race and class. It is absolutely the case that people who are struggling to meet basic needs, and because of the economics of racism, that's disproportionately people of color, people who are struggling to meet basic needs have less time to devote to activism. That's just a natural fact. And furthermore, if you're living in reduced economic circumstances, if you're facing police abuse, homelessness, landlordism, that's a real word, then probably if you are an activist, your activism is going to be in that direction first. The direction of maybe getting some community parks in, or getting a community watch in, or whatever the case might be. And so that was one of the reasons that the early gay rights movement was disproportionately white. But at the same time, it was also disproportionately white because the white people who were in it were not aware of their own privilege. We're not paying attention to the fact that there might actually be institutionalized or structured racism within their movement. Huh? Interesting, huh? Are you seeing these analogies? Now, another thing you might not understand that was happening at the same time, if you read, oh my gosh, the book is Flying Close to the Sun. It's by a woman who, Catherine Wilkerson, Flying Close to the Sun. She was in the SDS, the Students for Democratic Society. Also what was happening in the 1970s was that white women who were interested in questions like rape and domestic violence were under assault from white men on the left, who told them that they were racist for caring about these things because the U.S. was killing people in Vietnam. And how can you care about your own private life when the U.S. is killing people in Vietnam and children of color, although they didn't say color back then, they said black, or in some cases even Negro still, are hungry in the ghetto. At the same time, so this was obviously illegitimate, for a white guy who was just hoping for the right to continue to date, rape, and batter, to tell women who were concerned about date, rape, and battery that they were racist for talking about it. At the same time, the feminist movement was legitimately the target of critique from women of color within the movement for their failure to adequately attend to racism. So again, what we saw were critiques that were both true and false, sometimes leveled in good faith, sometimes leveled in bad faith. And the question, the task that we faced back then, the task that we faced was to, what would be ideal? Well, what would be ideal would be to acknowledge the critiques that are legitimate, yes, and that are leveled in good faith, or regardless of who's saying them or why. If it's a legitimate critique, acknowledge it, fix the problem, fix whatever structural racism there might be within your organizations, but at the exact same time, refuse to collude with bad faith levelings of that. In other words, we would say, yes, it's absolutely the case that the gay rights movement at present is whiter than it should be. That does not mean the cause is unjust. It means we're messing up, and we need to fix how we're messing up, but it does not mean that the cause is unjust. And we need to be clear about both of those things, that we needed to fix the problems and that the cause remained just. Over time, of course, we're now decades in, and over time what has happened is the left has come to see two things. One, they've come to see these intersections. They've come to see that homophobia is deeply linked to sexism, deeply linked to racism, and they've come to understand the ways that that particular form of oppression links up with the other forms of oppression they were already concerned about. Another thing that has happened is that folks have, for the most part, come to understand that homophobia, transphobia, the challenges faced by queer teens, for example, are just wrong in and of themselves. Whether or not they were linked with sexism, whether or not they were linked with racism, those are injustices that are worthy of concern. And so, of course, this is what we're aiming for when we think about the animal liberation movement and its at present untoward whiteness. These are the challenges that face us. We have to be in a position to say, okay, here are the legitimate critiques of our movement, and we need to fix the problems. At the same time, we cannot, in fact, go along with illegitimate critiques. When some radical person tells you that he won't go vegan because there are food deserts where kids can't find fresh fruits and vegetables, then we need to be able to say, well, we're with you on the food deserts and working on that, but that's actually not relevant to your own personal behavior. We have to be able to clear enough to say, yes, this critique of our movement is correct, but that doesn't mean the cause is unjust. So, here's the situation. The situation is this. There is not, so far as I know, a racial difference in sympathies for animals. And what little survey research that I've seen, compared with my own experiences teaching, including when I taught for a year at MCTC, which was, by the way, the happiest place I ever taught, there is no less sympathy for animals or likeliness to agree that animals deserve rights among people of color than whites. If anything, there's some research that suggests that women of color are more likely to be supportive of animal rights, not less, more. And that's certainly been my personal experience as well in terms of talking about animal rights in classrooms that are definitely not white. And yet, there's absolutely no denying that the organized animal liberation movement is disproportionately white. And now we have to make that same caveat that I made about the early gay rights movement. Not